Kodiak Island. Just the name conjures images of endless forests, icy waves, and a wildness that never quite lets you forget how small you really are. But beneath the beauty, something else lurks. Something ancient, hungry, and patient. Tonight, I'm going to take you deep into the heart of Kodiak's darkest secrets, stories whispered in fishing shacks, passed down in hushed voices, and buried beneath the moss and fog. These aren't just tales to scare children. These are the true accounts of people who vanished without a trace, of voices that cry out in the night, of shadows that move when you're sure you're alone. Some say the island is cursed. Others say it's just the wilderness playing tricks. But after you hear what happened in these small, isolated corners, you'll never look at Kodiak or the darkness the same way again. Turn down the lights, listen closely, and remember, on Kodiak Island, the scariest things are the ones you never see coming. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to believe in the supernatural. I grew up in Kodiak, Alaska, where the wind howls louder than any ghost story, and the sea is a constant, living presence. But what happened to me and my brother in Anton Larson Bay changed everything I thought I knew about fear. It started with a rumor. In small towns like ours, rumors are like the tide, always coming in, always going out, but never really gone. People said a fisherman named Pete had vanished out on the bay. Not just missing, vanished. No boat, no body, no sign, just gone. Some said he'd run off to Anchorage. Others whispered about something darker, something that lived in the water. I didn't pay much attention at first. My brother Mark and I had our own problems. Our dad had passed away the year before, and we were barely scraping by, running his old fishing boat, the Sea Otter. We fished for halibut and crab, selling what we could to the cannery. It was hard work, but it kept us busy and kept our minds off the grief. One morning in late September, Mark came into the kitchen, pale as a sheet. He'd been out late the night before, checking the crab pots. He said he'd seen something strange out on the water, a light, moving fast, too fast for any boat. He thought maybe it was a Coast Guard cutter, but there'd been no radio chatter, no engine noise. Just that eerie, silent light. I laughed it off. Probably just some drunk tourists in a skiff, I said, but Mark didn't laugh. He just stared at his coffee, hands shaking. That night I couldn't sleep. The wind rattled the windows and the old house creaked like it was alive. Around midnight, I heard Mark's boots on the porch. I got up and found him standing outside, staring at the bay. The moon was bright and the water looked like black glass. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I listened. At first, all I heard was the wind, but then, faint and far away, I heard it, a low, mournful sound like someone singing. It drifted across the water, rising and falling with the waves. It didn't sound human. We stood there, shivering, until the sound faded. Mark wouldn't come back inside. He just kept staring at the bay like he was waiting for something. The next day, we went out to check the crab pots. The water was calm, but there was a strange fog hanging over the bay, thick and heavy. We motored out to the first buoy, and I leaned over to grab the line. That's when I saw it, a piece of torn yellow rain slicker tangled in the rope, Pete's slicker. Everyone knew it. He wore it every day. Mark pulled it up, and we both stared at it. There was something else caught in the line, a chunk of wood, splintered and blackened like it had been burned. It looked like part of a boat. We radioed the harbor master, but he just told us to bring it in. Probably just debris, he said, but I could hear the worry in his voice. That night the singing came back, louder this time, closer. It sounded like it was right outside our window. Mark wanted to go down to the dock, but I stopped him. "We're not going out there," I said. "Not tonight." He argued, but I wouldn't budge. We locked the doors and sat in the dark, listening to that awful, inhuman song. It went on for hours, echoing through the house, until finally, just before dawn, it stopped. The next morning, we found footprints on the dock. Bare feet, wide and webbed like nothing I'd ever seen. They led from the water up to the boat, then disappeared. Mark was obsessed after that. He started reading old books about Kodiak legends, stories about sea spirits, shapeshifters, things that lived in the deep. He said Pete hadn't just vanished, he'd been taken. I tried to ignore it, but the fear was getting to me. Every night the singing got louder. Sometimes I'd see shapes moving in the fog, tall and thin, with long arms that dragged in the water. The other fishermen started talking too. Boats were going missing, crab pots coming up empty, strange lights on the bay. One night Mark woke me up. "It's here," he whispered. "It's calling me." I tried to stop him, but he was already out the door, running down to the dock. I chased after him, heart pounding. The fog was so thick I could barely see. I heard the singing, louder than ever, and Mark's voice calling out into the darkness. I reached the dock just in time to see him climbing into the sea otter. The engine sputtered to life, and he pushed off, heading straight into the fog. I screamed for him to come back, but he didn't even look at me. I watched helpless as the boat disappeared into the mist. The singing grew louder, almost deafening, and then, suddenly, silence. I waited on the dock all night, but Mark never came back. When the sun rose, the fog was gone, and so was the sea otter. All that was left was a single, webbed footprint on the dock, still wet. The Coast Guard searched for days, but they never found a trace. People said Mark had run off just like Pete. But I know the truth. Something lives in Anton Larsen Bay, something old, something hungry. And it's still out there, singing in the fog, waiting for the next fisherman to answer its call. After Mark disappeared, I was never the same. I'd always thought of myself as practical, grounded, someone who believed in what I could see and touch. But now, every time I looked out at Anton Larsen Bay, I felt like I was staring into the mouth of something ancient and hungry. The kind of thing that didn't care if you believed in it or not. The days after Mark vanished were a blur. The Coast Guard sent out search parties combing the shoreline and dragging the bay. They found nothing. Not a scrap of the sea otter, not a piece of clothing, not even a floating buoy. It was like the boat and my brother had been swallowed whole. People in town started to avoid me. I could see it in their eyes. They thought I was cursed, or maybe just crazy. I heard the whispers at the cannery, the way folks would stop talking when I walked by. Even my old friends kept their distance. I guess they were scared that whatever took Mark might come for them next. I tried to keep busy, fixing up the house and doing odd jobs. But every night when the wind picked up and the fog rolled in, I'd hear that singing. Sometimes it was so faint I thought I was imagining it. Other times it was so loud I'd wake up gasping, heart pounding, convinced it was right outside my window. I started having dreams, vivid, terrifying dreams. I'd see Mark standing on the dock, his face pale and wet, his eyes wide and empty. He'd call my name, his voice echoing across the water, and I'd feel this overwhelming urge to follow him. Sometimes I'd wake up standing at the back door, my hand on the knob, ready to step out into the night. One evening, about a week after Mark disappeared, I got a visit from old man Sokolov. He was one of the oldest fishermen in Kodiak, a tough old Russian who'd seen more winters than anyone else I knew. He knocked on my door just after sunset, his face drawn and serious. "I heard about your brother," he said, his voice low. "You see anything strange out there?" I hesitated, but something in his eyes told me he already knew. So I told him everything: the singing, the footprints, the fog. He listened without interrupting, just nodding along. When I finished, he leaned in close. "You know the stories, the ones about the bay." I shook my head. He sighed, looking out at the darkening water. "My father told me long ago there are things in these waters. Spirits maybe, or something older. They come when the fog is thick, when the moon is high. They sing, and if you listen too long, they take you. My uncle vanished just like your brother. Only thing left was his boots on the dock." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, carved talisman, an old piece of driftwood, shaped like a fish with strange markings burned into it. "Keep this by your bed," he said. "And whatever you do, don't answer when you hear the singing." I thanked him, though I wasn't sure what good a piece of wood would do. But that night, I put it on my nightstand anyway. I lay awake, listening to the wind, clutching the talisman in my hand. The singing came again, soft at first, then rising until it filled the whole house. I felt that same pull, that urge to get up and go outside. But I gripped the talisman tighter, whispering Mark's name over and over, trying to anchor myself. Suddenly, the singing stopped. The silence was so complete it hurt my ears. Then, I heard footsteps on the porch, slow, dragging footsteps like someone walking with bare, wet feet. I held my breath, heart hammering in my chest. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I could hear water dripping, the boards creaking under the weight. Then a voice, Mark's voice, soft and pleading. "Let me in," he whispered. "Please, I'm so cold." I almost got up. I almost opened the door. But something in the way he said it, the emptiness in his voice, made me freeze. I stayed in bed, clutching the talisman, tears streaming down my face. After a few minutes, the footsteps faded. The singing started up again, farther away this time, drifting back out over the bay. The next morning, I found wet footprints on the porch, webbed just like before. But this time, there was something else. A scrap of yellow rain slicker caught on a nail by the door, Pete's slicker, or maybe Mark's. I couldn't tell anymore. I knew then that whatever was out there wasn't done with me. It wanted me to follow, to answer the call. But I refused. I boarded up the windows, kept the talisman close, and never went near the water after dark. Over time, the singing faded. The fog still comes, and sometimes I see strange lights on the bay. But I don't listen. I don't look. I just keep my head down and pray that whatever took Mark is satisfied. But sometimes, late at night, I hear footsteps on the porch, and a voice, soft and cold, calling my name. I don't answer. I never will. But I know deep down that one day the bay will come for me too. And when it does, there won't be anything left. Just a story, whispered in the wind, about the fisherman who vanished without a trace. If you've never been to Bell's Flats, you might think it's just another quiet patch of Kodiak Island, rows of weathered houses, a single gas station, and the endless hush of spruce trees pressing in from every side. But if you ask anyone who's lived there long enough, they'll tell you, the flats have a way of holding onto secrets. And sometimes, those secrets come screaming out of the dark. I was 17 the night the sirens cried. It was late October, the kind of night when the wind rattles the eaves and the rain comes down in sheets. My mom was working the night shift at the hospital, and my little brother, Jamie, was asleep in his room. I was supposed to be studying for a math test, but I kept getting distracted by the storm outside. Every so often, the power would flicker, and the shadows in the corners of the house seemed to twitch and stretch. Around midnight, I heard the first siren. It started as a low wail, rising and falling, echoing off the trees. At first, I thought it was just the volunteer fire department, maybe a car accident on the highway or a chimney fire. But then another siren joined in, and another, until it sounded like every alarm in town was going off at once. I went to the window and peered out. The rain was coming down so hard I could barely see the streetlights, but I could make out the red and blue flashes bouncing off the wet pavement, and the shapes of people running from house to house, banging on doors. My phone buzzed, a text from my friend Riley, who lived 2 blocks over. "Riley, you hearing this? Something's wrong. My dad says stay inside." I texted back, asking what was happening, but she didn't reply. I tried calling my mom, but the call wouldn't go through. The cell service in Bell's Flats is spotty on a good day, and tonight, with the storm, it was useless. That's when Jamie came stumbling into the living room, rubbing his eyes. "What's that noise?" he asked, voice trembling. I tried to sound calm. "Just the sirens, bud. Probably a big accident or something." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. The sirens weren't stopping. If anything, they were getting louder, overlapping in a way that made my skin crawl. It was like the whole town was screaming. I turned on the TV, hoping for some news, but all I got was static. The power flickered again, and for a second the house was plunged into darkness. When the lights came back, Jamie was clutching my arm, his eyes wide. "Can we call Mom?" he whispered. I tried again, but the call dropped. I was about to tell him it was fine, that everything would be okay, when I heard something new, a voice, crackling through the old police scanner my mom kept in the kitchen. All units, code black. Repeat, code black. Do not engage. Stay inside. Lock all doors and windows." The voice was shaky, almost frantic. I'd never heard a code black before. I didn't even know what it meant, but the fear in the dispatcher's voice was unmistakable. I locked the doors and pulled Jamie away from the windows. The sirens kept wailing, and now, underneath them, I could hear something else, a kind of keening, high and thin, like someone crying out in pain. It didn't sound human. We huddled in the hallway, listening. The keening grew louder, weaving in and out of the sirens, until it felt like the whole house was vibrating with it. Jamie started to cry, and I held him close, trying to keep my own fear in check. Then suddenly, the siren stopped. The silence was so sudden, so complete, that it made my ears ring. For a moment, I thought maybe it was over. Maybe whatever had happened was done. But then the keening started up again, louder than ever, right outside our house. I crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. The street was empty, but the rain had stopped, and the air felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. I saw movement near the edge of the woods, a figure, tall and thin, swaying back and forth. Its head was thrown back, mouth open in a silent scream. I blinked and it was gone. I pulled Jamie into the bathroom, the only room with no windows, and locked the door. We sat there in the dark, listening to the keening as it moved up and down the street, sometimes right outside the door, sometimes farther away. I tried to call my mom again, but the phone was dead. After what felt like hours, the keening faded. I waited, counting the seconds until I was sure it was gone. Then I crept out, heart pounding, and checked the house. Everything seemed normal except for the front door, which was wide open. I know I'd locked it, I was sure of it. I closed the door and bolted it, then checked on Jamie. He was curled up on the bathroom floor, shivering. I sat with him until dawn, too scared to sleep. When the sun finally came up, the siren started again, just for a few seconds, then stopped. I looked outside and saw people coming out of their houses, looking as shaken as I felt. No one seemed to know what had happened. The police said it was a false alarm, a glitch in the system. But I saw the way they looked at the woods, the way they kept glancing over their shoulders. That day, Riley finally texted me back. "Riley, did you see it too?" I never answered her. I didn't want to talk about what I'd seen. I still don't. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind is just right, I hear that keening again, drifting in from the trees. And I wonder if the sirens will ever be enough to keep whatever's out there from coming back. The days after that night felt like living in a dream I couldn't wake up from. People in Bell's flats tried to go back to normal, but you could feel the tension everywhere. At the store, at school, even in the way neighbors avoided each other's eyes. Nobody wanted to talk about the sirens, or the keening, or the strange things we'd all heard but couldn't explain. My mom came home the next morning, exhausted and pale. She said the hospital had been chaos all night, patients panicking, staff running from room to room, alarms going off for no reason. She asked if we were okay, and I lied, telling her we just slept through the storm. I didn't want her to worry, and honestly, I didn't know how to explain what had really happened. But Jamie knew. He wouldn't leave my side for days. He kept asking about the thing in the woods, the one I'd seen swaying and screaming in the rain. I told him it was just a bad dream, but I could see in his eyes that he didn't believe me. He'd heard it too. A few days later, Riley came over. She looked tired with dark circles under her eyes. We sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the clouds roll over the mountains. "Did you really see it?" she asked quietly. I nodded, Just for a second it was tall, wrong, like it didn't belong here. She shivered. My dad said he saw something too. He was out looking for our dog when the sirens started. He said he saw a woman in the trees, but her face was all messed up, like it was melting. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind. I wanted to tell her about the open door, about the way the keening had seemed to move through the house, searching for something. But I couldn't get the words out. That night I dreamed about the sirens. In the dream, I was standing in the middle of the street, rain pouring down, and the sirens were so loud they made my teeth ache. The keening was there too, weaving in and out of the noise, calling my name. I woke up gasping, heart racing, convinced I could still hear it echoing in the distance. The next day, Jamie came running into my room, clutching something in his hand. It was a scrap of fabric, torn and muddy, with a strange symbol drawn on it in black marker. He said he'd found it in the backyard, near the edge of the woods. I took it from him, trying to hide how much it scared me. The symbol looked like an eye, with jagged lines radiating out from the center. I'd never seen anything like it before. That afternoon, I went to the library and started digging through old books about Kodiak Island. Legends, ghost stories, anything I could find. Most of it was the usual stuff. Tales of lost hunters, strange lights in the sky, the occasional Bigfoot sighting. But then I found a thin, battered book tucked away on the bottom shelf. It was called The Watchers of the Woods. Inside, there was a story about the crying woman of Bell's Flats. According to the legend, she was a spirit who haunted the woods, wailing for her lost children. The story said that when the sirens cried, it was her warning, her way of telling people to stay inside, to lock their doors, to hide from whatever else might be out there. The book even had a drawing of the symbol Jamie had found. It was called the Watcher's Eye, and it was supposed to protect you from being seen by the crying woman. But the book warned that if you heard her keening, you had to cover your ears and never, ever answer her call. That night I taped the symbol to every window and door in the house. I didn't care if it was just a story. I needed to do something, anything, to feel safe. But the feeling of dread never really went away. Every time the wind picked up, I'd tense, waiting for the sirens to start again. Jamie stopped sleeping through the night. He'd wake up screaming, saying the woman was standing outside his window, her face pressed against the glass. One evening, about a week after the sirens, I was walking home from Riley's house when I heard it again. A faint, high-pitched wail drifting through the trees. I froze, heart pounding, and looked around. The street was empty, but I could see something moving at the edge of the woods, a pale shape gliding between the trees. I ran the rest of the way home, slamming the door behind me. I told myself it was just the wind, just my imagination. But deep down, I knew better. The next morning, the police came to our door. They said a man had gone missing during the storm, the same night the sirens cried. They asked if we'd seen anything unusual. I shook my head, but Jamie started to cry. The officer knelt down and asked him what was wrong. "She's still out there," Jamie whispered. "She's looking for us." The officer gave us a strange look, then left. But I could tell he was scared too. It's been years since that night, but I still think about it every time the wind howls through Bell's Flats. Sometimes, when the rain is heavy and the power flickers, I hear the faint echo of sirens in the distance. And every so often, I catch a glimpse of something pale and thin moving through the trees. People say the sirens were just a glitch, a freak accident, but I know the truth. The crying woman is still out there, waiting for someone to answer her call. And if you ever hear the sirens in Bell's Flats, do what I did. Lock your doors, cover your ears, and pray she passes you by. Because the next time the sirens cry, you might not be so lucky. If you've ever been deep in the spruce forests outside Kodiak, you know how easy it is to get lost. The trees grow so thick and close together that the sunlight barely touches the mossy ground. The air always feels damp, heavy with the scent of pine and earth. It's beautiful, but it's also the kind of place where you can't help but feel watched. I grew up in a little house on the edge of the forest, just outside a tiny settlement called Kodiak. My dad was a logger, and my mom worked at the school. Most of my childhood was spent exploring the woods with my older cousin, Tyler. We'd build forts, climb trees, and pretend we were explorers. The forest was our playground, and we thought we knew every inch of it. But there was one part of the woods we never went near, a patch of old-growth spruce that everyone called the Deep. The trees there were older, taller, and darker than anywhere else. Even the animals seemed to avoid it. My dad used to warn us, "Don't go into the Deep. People get turned around in there. Some never come out." I always thought he was just trying to scare us. But then, one autumn, something happened that changed my mind forever. It was late October, just after the first frost. Tyler and I were out hunting for grouse, our .22 rifles slung over our shoulders. The air was crisp, and the ground was slick with wet leaves. We'd been out for hours, following game trails and listening for the telltale flutter of wings. We were about to head home when Tyler spotted something strange, a set of footprints, deep in the mud, leading straight into the Deep. They were huge, much bigger than any boot print I'd ever seen, and spaced far apart like whatever made them had a long stride. "Probably just a bear," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Tyler shook his head. "Bears don't walk like that, and look, no claw marks." He was right. The prints were oddly human but wrong somehow. The toes were too long and the heel was narrow, almost pointed. We should have turned back, but we were teenagers and curiosity got the better of us. We followed the tracks, pushing deeper into the forest than we'd ever gone before. The trees closed in around us, blocking out the sky. The air grew colder, and the silence was so thick it felt like a blanket over my ears. After about 20 minutes, we came to a clearing. In the center was an old, rotting stump, covered in strange carvings, spirals, eyes, and symbols I didn't recognize. The footprints circled the stump, then vanished into the undergrowth. Tyler knelt down to get a closer look. "What do you think made these?" he whispered. Before I could answer, we both heard it, a low, guttural growl coming from the shadows at the edge of the clearing. It sounded almost human, but not quite. My skin prickled, and I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. We spun around, rifles raised, but saw nothing. The growl faded, replaced by a whispering sound like wind moving through dry grass, but there was no wind. The air was dead still. "Let's get out of here," I said, my voice shaking. We started back the way we came, but the forest seemed different, darker, denser. The trees looked twisted, their branches reaching out like claws. Every step felt wrong, like we were walking in circles. That's when we saw it, a shadow, tall and thin, gliding between the trees. It moved without sound, almost like it was floating. I caught a glimpse of its face, pale, with empty black eyes and a mouth that stretched too wide. Tyler grabbed my arm. "Run," he hissed. We bolted, crashing through the undergrowth, not caring about the noise. The shadow followed, always just out of sight, slipping between the trees. I could hear it whispering, a voice like dry leaves scraping together. We ran until our lungs burned, but no matter how far we went, we couldn't find the edge of the forest. The trees just kept going, endless and unchanging. I started to panic, convinced we'd never get out. Then suddenly the whispering stopped. The forest went silent. I turned around and the shadow was gone. We stumbled into another clearing, this one smaller and filled with dead birds, dozens of them, lying in a perfect circle around a pile of stones. The air stank of rot and something sweet, like decaying flowers. Tyler bent down to look at the stones. "These are arranged on purpose," he said, voice trembling, "like some kind of ritual." I wanted to leave, but something kept me rooted to the spot. I felt like I was being watched, like eyes were boring into the back of my skull. Then from the corner of my eye, I saw the shadow again. Closer this time, its arms stretched wide, fingers long and thin as twigs. It didn't move, just stood there watching us. Tyler raised his rifle, but I grabbed his arm. "Don't," I whispered. "It's not a bear, it's not anything we know." We backed away slowly, never taking our eyes off the shadow. It didn't follow, but I could feel its gaze, cold and hungry. We finally broke through the trees and stumbled out onto the logging road, gasping for air. The sun was setting, and the sky was streaked with red. We looked back, but the forest was still and silent, as if nothing had happened. We never spoke about what we saw that day, but I started having nightmares, dreams of the shadow, of the dead birds, of the endless, whispering forest. Sometimes I'd wake up and see it standing at the edge of the trees, watching the house. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but deep down I knew the truth. Something lives in the deep, something old and hungry and patient. And it knows my name. After that day in the deep, nothing felt the same. Tyler and I tried to go back to our old routines, school, chores, helping Dad with firewood. But there was always a heaviness between us, a silent agreement not to talk about what we'd seen. But the forest was always there, pressing in on the edge of our lives, and I could feel the shadow's eyes on me every time I stepped outside. The nightmares got worse. I'd dream of wandering the deep, lost and alone, the trees closing in tighter and tighter until I couldn't breathe. Sometimes in the dream, I'd see the shadow waiting for me, its mouth stretching open in a silent scream. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, convinced I could still hear the whispering in my ears. One night, about a week after our encounter, Tyler showed up at my window. He looked pale and shaken, his eyes wild. "I saw it again," he whispered. "It was outside my house, just standing there, watching." I let him in and we sat on my bed, whispering in the dark. He told me he'd found more footprints in the yard, those same long, narrow prints pressed deep into the mud. His dog wouldn't go near the edge of the woods anymore. Neither would ours. We decided we had to do something. We couldn't just sit around, waiting for the shadow to come for us. So, against all common sense, we made a plan to go back into the deep. We told ourselves we'd find the clearing, destroy the pile of stones, and maybe, just maybe, break whatever hold the shadow had on us. We waited for a clear day, packed our rifles, flashlights, and a can of gasoline. We didn't tell anyone where we were going. Part of me hoped we'd chicken out, but when the morning came, we both showed up at the trailhead, grim and determined. The forest was even darker than I remembered. The air felt thick, almost oily, and every sound seemed muffled. We followed the same path as before, counting our steps, marking trees with orange tape so we wouldn't get lost. It didn't take long for the whispering to start. At first, it was just a faint rustle like wind in the branches. But as we got closer to the clearing, the voices grew louder, overlapping and echoing, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. My skin crawled, and I gripped my rifle so hard my knuckles turned white. We found the clearing just as we'd left it. The dead birds were gone, but the pile of stones was still there, surrounded by a ring of blackened earth. The carvings on the stump looked fresher, deeper, as if someone, or something, had been here since our last visit. Tyler poured gasoline over the stones and lit a match. The fire flared up, sending thick, oily smoke into the air. The whispering turned into a shriek, high and piercing, and the ground seemed to tremble beneath our feet. That's when the shadow appeared, right at the edge of the clearing, taller than before, its arms stretched wide. Its face was a blur of darkness, but I could feel its eyes on me, cold and furious. Tyler raised his rifle and fired. The shot echoed through the trees, but the shadow didn't flinch. It just glided closer, its body rippling like smoke. I grabbed Tyler's arm and pulled him back. "Run!" I shouted. We tore through the forest, branches whipping at our faces, the shadow gliding after us, always just out of reach. The whispering filled my head, drowning out everything else. I stumbled and fell, scraping my hands on the rough bark, but Tyler hauled me to my feet and we kept running. We burst out of the trees and onto the logging road, gasping for air. The shadow stopped at the edge of the forest, its form flickering in the sunlight. For a moment, I thought it would follow us, but then it melted back into the trees and the whispering faded. We didn't speak on the walk home. We just trudged in silence, too shaken to process what had happened. That night, I dreamed of the clearing burning, the stones cracking and splitting in the flames. The shadow stood in the fire, its mouth open in a soundless scream. When I woke up, the house was cold and silent, and I felt a strange sense of relief. For a while, things got better. The nightmares faded, and the feeling of being watched slowly disappeared. Tyler and I avoided the deep, and the animals started coming back to the edge of the woods. It was almost like the forest was healing. But sometimes, when the wind is just right, I hear the whispering again, faint and far away. And every so often, I find a footprint in the mud, long, narrow, and pointed, leading back into the deep. I know the shadow is still out there, waiting. Maybe we broke its hold, or maybe we just made it angry. Either way, I'll never go back into those woods, not for anything. If you ever find yourself near Kodiak, and you see a patch of old-growth spruce that feels colder than the rest, turn around. Don't listen to the whispers. Don't follow the footprints. Because some things in the forest are better left in the shadows. If you've ever seen the old Cape Kodiak lighthouse, you know it's the loneliest place on Kodiak Island. Perched on a jagged cliff, battered by wind and salt spray, it's a relic from another time. Most folks in town avoid it, especially after dark. But for a while, it was my home. My name is Sam, and in the fall of 2012, I took a job as the assistant lighthouse keeper. I was 24, fresh out of college and desperate for work. The main keeper, Mr. Harlan, was a gruff old-timer who'd been there for decades. He didn't say much, but he knew every inch of the place. My job was simple: keep the light running, do the maintenance, and help with the radio broadcasts to the Coast Guard. The first few weeks were uneventful. The days were short, the nights long and howling. The wind never stopped, and the fog rolled in so thick you could barely see your hand in front of your face. But I liked the solitude. There was something peaceful about the endless rhythm of the waves and the steady sweep of the beacon. But then in late October, things started to change. It began with the radio. Every night at exactly 2:17 a.m., the static would clear and I'd hear a voice, faint, crackling, almost drowned out by the hiss. At first, I thought it was just interference, maybe a fishing boat or a prank. But the voice always said the same thing, over and over. "Help me, the light is dying, I can't see the shore." I told Mr. Harlan about it, but he just grunted. "Ignore it. This place picks up all kinds of weird signals. Ghosts on the wire, that's all." But the voice kept coming. Every night, same time, same words. Sometimes it sounded closer, almost desperate. I started recording the broadcasts, hoping to catch something I could play back for Harlan. But when I listened to the tapes in the morning, all I heard was static. One night, I decided to stay up and listen. I sat by the radio, notebook in hand, waiting for 2:17. The wind was howling, rattling the windows, and the fog was so thick I couldn't see the beacon from the kitchen. When the clock hit 2:17, the static cleared and the voice came through, louder than ever. "Help me, the light is dying, I can't see the shore, please someone." Then suddenly the voice changed. It wasn't just pleading anymore, it was angry. "Why did you leave me? Why did you turn off the light?" I jumped, heart pounding. The radio crackled, then went dead. I sat there in the dark, listening to the wind, feeling like I wasn't alone. The next morning, I found Mr. Harlan in the lamp room, staring out at the sea. He looked tired, older than I'd ever seen him. "You ever hear about the wreck?" he asked, voice low. I shook my head. Back in '78, a fishing boat went down in a storm. The keeper on duty was supposed to keep the light burning, but something happened. The light went out. They say the whole crew drowned right out there. He pointed to the churning water below. "Some folks think their spirits still wander looking for the shore." He didn't say anything else, but I could tell the story bothered him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the voice, the anger, the way it seemed to know I was listening. A few nights later, the fog was so thick it pressed against the windows like wet cotton. I was on the late shift, checking the generator, when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, slow, dragging. I called out, thinking it was Harlan, but there was no answer. I climbed up to the lamp room, flashlight in hand. The door was open, swinging in the wind. The beacon was still turning, but the light seemed dimmer than usual, flickering in the fog. I stepped inside and froze. There was a figure standing by the window, staring out at the sea. Tall, thin, dressed in an old-fashioned rain slicker. I could see right through him. The wall behind him was faintly visible, like he was made of mist. He turned to look at me, and his eyes were empty, black as the ocean at midnight. "Why did you leave me?" he whispered. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my flashlight. The figure faded, dissolving into the fog. I ran downstairs, heart hammering, and found Harlan in the kitchen, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, almost smiling. I wanted to tell him what I'd seen, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just nodded and sat down, hands shaking. After that, things got worse. The radio broadcasts grew louder, more insistent. Sometimes I'd hear voices whispering in the halls, calling my name. Doors would slam shut on their own, and the temperature would drop so fast my breath would fog in the air. One night, I woke to the sound of the foghorn blaring, over and over, even though the weather was clear. I ran outside and saw the beacon flickering, barely visible through the mist. The air was thick with the smell of salt and something else, something rotten. I climbed up to the lamp room and found the door locked from the inside. I pounded on it, shouting for Harlan, but there was no answer. The radio crackled behind me and the voice came through, louder than ever. "Help me, the light is dying. I can't see the shore, don't leave me here." I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, and the world went black. When I came to, I was lying at the bottom of the spiral stairs, my head throbbing and my mouth full of the taste of salt. The lighthouse was silent except for the distant crash of waves and the low, steady hum of the generator. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed it all, the voice, the cold hand, the locked door. But when I sat up, I saw the lamp room door was still shut tight, and the air was thick with the smell of seawater and something old, like mildew and rust. I called out for Mr. Harlan, but there was no answer. My flashlight was gone, so I fumbled my way up the stairs in the dark, my heart pounding with every step. When I reached the top, the door swung open with a groan. The lamp room was empty, but the beacon was barely glowing, its light sputtering like a dying candle. I checked the controls, everything was working, but the light just wouldn't stay bright. I felt a chill on the back of my neck, like someone was standing right behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there. Just the fog pressing against the glass, swirling in strange patterns. I tried the radio, desperate to call for help, but all I got was static. Then, at exactly 2:17 a.m., the voice came through again, clearer than ever, echoing through the empty room. "Help me, the light is dying. I can't see the shore, don't leave me here." But this time there was something else. A second voice, deeper, angrier, overlapping the first. "You let us drown, you turned away. Now you'll never leave." The radio screeched and the room went ice cold. I could see my breath hanging in the air, swirling like the fog outside. The beacon flickered, then went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. That's when I saw them, shapes moving in the fog outside the windows. Faces pressed against the glass, pale and bloated, eyes wide and staring. Their mouths moved in silent screams, hands clawing at the panes. I stumbled back, tripping over the metal grating, and the door slammed shut behind me. I pounded on the door, shouting for Harlan, for anyone. But the only answer was the howling wind and the relentless, desperate voices on the radio. Help me, the light is dying, I can't see the shore. I don't know how long I was trapped up there. Time seemed to stretch and twist, the darkness pressing in on all sides. I tried to keep the beacon running, but every time I got it to flicker back to life, the faces would return, more of them each time, their eyes full of accusation and sorrow. At some point, I must have passed out. When I woke, the sun was rising and the fog had lifted. The lamp room was empty, the beacon shining steady and strong. The radio was silent. I stumbled downstairs, half expecting to find Harlan waiting with a cup of coffee and a gruff joke. But the kitchen was empty. His boots were by the door, his coat on the hook, but he was gone. I searched the whole lighthouse, calling his name until my voice was raw. I even checked the cliffs, terrified I'd find him at the bottom. But there was no sign of him, no footprints, no note, nothing. I called the Coast Guard and they sent a team out by boat. They searched the lighthouse from top to bottom, but Harlan had vanished without a trace. They questioned me for hours, but I could only tell them what I knew, that he was just gone. They let me go back to town and I never set foot in that lighthouse again. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the radio crackle to life, even though I'm miles away. The same voice, pleading and desperate. Help me, the light is dying, I can't see the shore. A few months later, I got a package in the mail. No return address, just my name scrawled on the front. Inside was a cassette tape, old and worn. I dug out an old player and pressed play. At first it was just static. Then faintly I heard Harlan's voice. If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. There's something in the fog, something that wants the light to go out. Don't let it. No matter what you see, no matter what you hear, keep the light burning, or they'll come for you too. The tape ended with a burst of static, and then silence. I still have nightmares about that place. The faces in the fog, the cold hand on my shoulder, the endless pleading voices. I don't know what happened to Harlan or the crew of that lost fishing boat, but I do know this. The Cape Chiniac Lighthouse is not just a building, it's a warning. If you ever find yourself out there and the fog starts to roll in, do yourself a favor, keep the light burning. And whatever you do, don't answer the radio at 2:17 a.m. because some voices are never meant to be heard. Kodiak Island hides more than just wild beauty and stormy seas. It keeps secrets that chill the blood and haunt the soul. From vanishing fishermen and crying sirens, to shadows lurking in ancient forests and the desperate voices echoing from a lonely lighthouse, these stories remind us that some mysteries are better left unsolved. Maybe you've heard whispers in the fog or felt eyes watching from the trees. Which story unsettled you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And if you crave more true horror from the world's most remote places, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Until next time, stay safe and keep your lights burning.